공유되고 있지. 인컴 디스트리뷰션 이게 공유되고 있는 거. 오케이. 오케이. The most difficult subject in economic circle, economic discussions, is income distribution, because we do not have enough data for income distribution. In case of South Korea, as a consequence of very fast economic development, there are two views that income distribution has improved or income distribution has deteriorated. First of all, land reform in 1949 helped improving income distribution. For example, in 1930s, under colonial law, less than 10% peasants owned land. But after land reform, in 1949, over 60% peasants owned so the consequence improved income inequality. In rural side, land reform was massively helpful towards a more equal distribution. Average rise per capita for a tenant without any formal land, 33%. Limits on farm size also helpful in preventing the return of inequality. So land reform, to some extent, helped improving income inequality. avoiding income inequality. And the distribution of income and wealth, historical and structural factors, income and equity, historical trend. For example, there is a book that I want to introduce, written by Song, The Rise of the Korean Economy. You may be able to get this copy, Oxford University Press. And in his book, more wealth and equity information is available. For example, in 1950s, Arab land quite equitable because of land reform in the late 1949. 1960s, land and housing became dominant assets in households. So according to 1968 National Wealth Survey, this is National Wealth Survey, non-land assets by Korean households was only 10.5% of total wealth. So bulk of Korean households' assets was land-related assets. Population and according to housing census, total housing units, total households, 71%. By 2000, total housing units almost equal to total households. So almost all households have one form or the other house. Households without owning housing exceeds 40%. Perception of poverty and economic inequality exists. So there are trends towards an increasing inequality in South Korea. White collar, blue collar inequality, rural, urban residence inequality. But even this projection falls below the average of similar countries. Moreover, differing techniques and underlying assumptions for data gathering also affect these measurements. So within sector income inequality, these Gini index and tile index are both, the higher the number is, the society's income inequality is higher. So it's not too good to have high number of Gini coefficient and tile coefficient. So for example, rural income inequality case, Gini coefficient declined from 1967 to 1974. So what can you say? In the rural income area, there was income inequality reduced from 1967 to 1974. How about urban income inequality? The same is true. From 1963 to 1974, it substantially declined. But By 1975, it increased again, urban income inequality. Business income inequality. Business income inequality, Gini coefficient was increasing. That means in business income, large business, rich business, power becoming more powerful. So business income inequality increased. On the other hand, rural income inequality got reduced. On the other hand, urban income inequality was reducing, but increasing again near 1975. So again, these tile coefficients or Gini coefficients is the higher these numbers, the more unequal income distribution exists. Okay. Tax and national income account data on business income shows, for example, business plus global income increased sharply. Unincorporated business income, excluding agriculture, is also increasing sharply. So this is tax and national account data on business income. Between and within sector inequality, tile statistics. Again, between sector inequality means for example, under assumption A, between sector inequality increased from 1963 to 1975. Within sector inequality also increased, but mildly, not that much. Overall inequality in general increasing, but improving toward the end of 1975. So what is within sector inequality? What is between sector inequality? Between sector inequality is like urban sector, urban households. The household in urban sector and the rural sector household. That's between sector, rural sector, urban sector. Within sector inequality, within urban sector, urban households, there are rich urban families, rich households. At the same time, there are poor households, in the middle households. So within sector is within one group of people, sector. Between sector, urban sector, and rural sector. In other words, two distinctively different inequality. Farm households by size of family. Percentage share of all farm households. According to that, number of persons per household, 1960 census case, bulk of them was 5 to 6 persons per household, 31.8%. That remained the same, 1970 census, 33.9%. Okay. Distinctively different, maybe 9 and 10, 11 and up, large family portion got reduced. In other words, Korea becoming modernized from 1960 to 1970, large family structure, having 10 to 11 family members, household declined the percentage. Large family farm structure declined. Family size and life cycle effects on urban household income. This is by income group. So number one is poorest income group. Number nine is largest, richest income group. Household monthly income, on this scale. Household monthly expenditure on this scale. Family size, about 4 to 5. 1 divided by 3 per family household monthly income per family. Largest income earner group has very high per family income share. 2 divided by number 3 is per expenditure. So expenditure is largest with the richest family group. Group household income relative to average. Group income per capita relative to average. Group expenditure per capita relative to income is listed. And you can see that the higher income bracket has higher group income per capita relative to average. Family size and life cycle effects on farm household income, similar data. Okay. Age distribution of population in Korea and the United States. For example, at that time, 1970, 50 years ago, right? Korea's population, younger age, under 34, occupied roughly 74%. US, under 34, occupied only 58%. So a lot younger adult generation was in the main population force. Korea, South Korea, 50 years ago. A lot younger than US age structure. Owner-tenant distribution of farm household. This is a very interesting and important statistics. Full owner occupied 13.88% by liberation time, 1945. By 1970, full owner 64.6%. That means that's the consequence of land reform. Korea farmers becoming full ownership. By 1970, 64.6% became owner. By 1945, only 13.8%. Owner-tenant, only tenant reduced from 48.9%, 1945, to only 0.6%. So this is a devastating, this is a very remarkable land reform result. Distribution of farm household by income per household. So distribution of farm household by income per household, top 10% occupied 31%. But that reduced to 25%. Top 20%, 44%. 41%. Not change it that much. Next 40% increase from 36% to 40%. So this shows top 10% at least occupied 31% of farm household income. But by 1974, top 10% share got reduced to 25%. So in other words, within farm household income structure, income inequality got improved, got better, because top 10% concentration, 31%, got reduced to 25%. Okay. This is also very important statistic. Total per capita rural output by selected regions. Oh, these are just regional statistics, not that important. Urban wage and salary income distribution. In contrast to the regional distribution, which shows decline in regional differences in wages, the size distribution of wage and salary income on national basis has become more unequal. So table 125, 126 shows more unequalized wages and salary on a national basis. Okay. Distribution within the blue and white color categories did not change significantly between 1958 and 1972. If Korea follows Japan, the wage differential will narrow eventually, but has not yet occurred. In case of Japan, wage differential became narrowed down as economy makes progress. But Korea's case not arrived there yet, not yet occurred yet. That means still Korea has wage differential, wage disparity. That can be shown here. Regional wage distribution. In 1972, okay, so percent provincial wages or national wage. So if this black line was 1972, by 1988, okay, this dotted line, so it becomes more harmonized. The wage differential seems to be smoothed out. Okay. Distribution of earned income, percent of income in Korean manufacturing. Bottom 10% occupied 4.5% in 1958, 1972, 4.2%. Top 10% share increased from 20.5%, 25%. So we can conclude that top 10%, the rich became richer in manufacturing. Okay. Blue collar worker, white collar worker, top 10%. Blue collar worker also, top 10% increased their share from 17.2% to 19.8%. White collar workers from 17.3% to 19.4%. Also increased top 10% share. So in both blue collar, white collar workers, income disparity, income inequality has increased to some extent, right? Urban and rural household income, for example, urban household income in 1963, per capita income per household income dramatically increased from 1963 to 1975. Rural household income per household from 82.0, 80722. Per capita income, 128 all the way. So we can compare urban household income, rural household income. Urban household income increased more rapidly than rural household income. In terms of ratio, 3 divided by 1 is kind of disparity. So what we can say is that rural household income is about 84% of urban household income. Number 6, 4 divided by 2. Per capita income-wise, rural household per capita income is about 76.9% of urban household income. So these are comparative tables can show you urban rural income. And then business income, the source of Korean national income. If you look at this, the source of Korean national income, employee compensation, agricultural income, employee compensation is wages and salaries. Agricultural income is declining from 71% to 62.9% by 1975. Employee compensation, workers' salaries increased from 28% to 38%. Agricultural income declined from 42.9% to 24.1%. Unincorporated enterprises, that means restaurant owners, kind of self business proprietors, their income share increased steadily from 17.7% to 19.4%. So growth rates per annum, employee compensation increased sharply, 1963, 1975. GNP increased sharply, 9.6%. Agricultural income increased, but not as sharply as GNP or employee compensation. Employee compensation plus agricultural income together increased reasonably sharply, 8.5%. For example, automobile ownership structure by 1961, commercial dominated private government vehicle ownership. But by 1975, private automobile ownership dominated commercial automobile. So that means in between 1961, 1975, a lot of passenger cars, private ownership increased. Distribution of government revenue burden, what does that mean? The way you read this table is For example, top 10% of income is 44.9%. They took the burden of percent of taxes, 31.9%. So in other words, income was as high as 44.9%, but tax burden, they reduced 31.9%. By 1974, that figure changed for 45.6%, 39.1%. In other words, tax burden top 10% increased sharply. So government are imposing more taxes on top 10%, increasing their percent of tax share 31.9% to 39.1%. Okay. In addition, distribution of government revenue burden. This we discussed. Rural area, top 10% had an increasing share of tax burden, and the Gini coefficient getting worse. So rural income also inequality, showing great high inequality. Distribution of government expenditure benefits, percent of income, top 10% occupied 44.9%. Expenditure-wise, they occupied 20%. By 1974, similar rate, 45.6%, 19.6%. So expenditure benefits didn't change between 1965, 1974. Okay, this is rural bottom. The impact of distribution on growth. The removal of the Japanese colonial power, principal redistribution of income in rural sector caused new entrepreneurial class emerged after land reform. Highest incomes have gone to owners and managers of the booming business sector. Redistribution had a major positive impact on Korea's growth prospects, partly by eliminating sources of political tension and instability, and partly by opening up opportunities for advancement for many Koreans through education. So in other words, Korea's relative merit lies in, after land reform, Korea's income distribution became more equitable. At the same time, that reduced a lot of political tension between the rich and the poor and instability. And also it opened up social mobility. Social mobility meaning that opportunities for advancement of many Koreans through education to upper social scale, so social mobility, upper social status through education. So that was the most, important factor in Korea's. So overall distribution within rural area among urban wage earners has been quite stable, reasonably. Only business incomes and the incomes of high-level managers, professionals climbed more rapidly. modest increase in the degree of inequality. Korea has also remained a society with a high degree of equality of opportunity compared to other developing nations. This is the keyword, equality of opportunity. This is very important word. What is equality of opportunity? By land reform, Korea society was relatively classless. Non-rich, not many rich people, not that poor people. So that means almost all peasants group, all households could start off at the same level. So the question is how to promote their education, their children's education, so that children can benefit from education. And education is the major route to the top, and access to education became steadily wider. So in other words, to the top class social status, you need to take, for example, public exam, uh, public employee exam. All these through education, you can move up your social scale, and therefore Korea has also remained a society with a high degree of equality of opportunity. Okay. On the other hand, for example, as Lucas discussed, Philippines in early 1960s, they did not have equality of opportunity. Gated community, rich compound remains as rich compound, segregated from the rest of the society. Okay, therefore, education is not the major route to the top in Philippines. On the other hand, in Korea, education is the major route to the top. So that's why social fabric, social organization is different. And that matters in the long run economic development. Okay. Okay, this part we have concluded income distribution pattern. Conclusion, of course, toward the end of 1970s, there is some symptom that Korea's income inequality is getting worse, but relatively compared to other developing nations, income distribution was okay, acceptable, and not that, vividly getting worse. So in this respect, social mobility, equality of opportunity was helped out by Korean residents. So they helped in improving their well-being, improving economic welfare, improving economic growth. Everything was going through education and improving equality of opportunity. Okay. So that's the conclusion for income distribution. Okay. Next, I want to take a look at global trend. Let me see. Did I open up that? Okay, I'll have to mount. I'm sharing this. I enter Zoom again. Am I sharing? 레퍼런스부터 나와도 그렇지만. Okay. This is the PowerPoint that I prepared based on past seminars at National Economic Research Center, Korea's National Assembly Seminar Room, or University of Chicago Public Policy Workshop. Here and there, my seminar organized based on this issue of income inequality on a global scale. So we are going to take a look at this slide to show you that while South Korea went through a turbulent period of economic growth, world economy also went through very turbulent period of income inequality. For further references, if you are very serious about this topic, you can always look for my references toward the end of this slide. At the end of it, there is a bunch of references. Okay, as you know, world economy is divided into two groups: capitalist society and socialist economic bloc, for example, Soviet Union, and nearby some socialist economies. I don't know how we should treat China. China seems to be in between capitalistic economy and Soviet-style socialist economy. I think each economic system has merits and demerits. Socialist economy, like Soviet Union, has merit in the sense that relatively income distribution is not that unequal. Of course, there are rich Soviet families, rich households, and there are poor Soviet family and poor people too. But relatively speaking, the degree of inequality in Soviet economy or socialist economy should be less. Why? Because in principle, in socialist economy, they do not allow private property holding. Okay, so all the land is state-owned, All the houses are state-owned. There are no private property holding except a few farm buses, for example. So relatively good merit exists in socialist economy because relatively little income inequality exists. Therefore, social tension could be lower. But because of that, there are demerits in socialist economy because not allowing private property ownership and private farming, all farmers and entrepreneurs do not have great incentives like in capitalist society. So their search for profit making, profit earning is reduced, motivation is reduced, degree of strength is reduced. So there are merits and demerits. What I'm saying is Soviet economy style socialist economy lack incentives for further development, innovation, and so forth. On the other hand, it can reduce income inequality because it is not allowing private partnership or private ownership, property holding. On the other hand, how about capitalist side? Capitalist side merit is to have innovation, incentive for profit, entrepreneurial spirit, things like that. So they search for new goods, new ideas, new technology always. So incentive-wise, much stronger than socialist nations. But on the other hand, as a consequence of a very hard competition, the income inequality between the rich and the poor tends to be enlarging. Income distribution, income inequality is a very tough issue, very hard issue to tackle. But it is the issue the capitalist society should handle. So I'm showing you here recent income inequality trend in the West. So because of this income inequality, there is a strong tendency toward income-led growth policy by many Latin American countries, by many Southern European countries. They promote income and promote income-led growth policy to take care of income inequality. Okay. So let's see the US trend. This is the disparity in USA 2013. Top 10% income class average income divided by the lowest bottom 10% income. In 1980s, it was 11 times. In other words, the lowest 10% income times 11 will reach top 10% income class average income, mid-1980s. But that is no longer true. By 2013, it became 19. What does that mean? Top 10% income bottom 10% income getting more polarization, okay? So top 10%, lowest 10% income got more polarized between 1980 2013 period, okay? And if you see more data, this is US data. Average OECD average ratio is 9.6. Disparity between top 10% income, lowest 10% income in OECD scale, average scale, roughly about 10 times, not 19 times. So USA is more polarized. Income structure was, income difference, income inequality was more polarized than OECD average ratio. You see? Background of income-led growth policy, ratio of top 10% divided by 10%. Japan and Korea about 10, OECD average. Gini coefficient wise, the lowest is the best country, Denmark, lowest, Norway, Korea, Japan, Mexico, USA. It's getting worse. OECD poverty ratio, the ratio of households which has less than one half of the average household income. Average household income is one half less than. We call this as OECD poverty ratio. Mexico has 21.4%, USA 17.6%, Korea 14.6%, Japan 16%, OECD average is 11.2%. That means both Japan and Korea, USA, Mexico, all these countries are higher average poverty ratio than OECD average. Isn't it interesting? We thought, for example, Japan is a rich country, so must have very low poverty ratio, but it did not. It had a relatively high poverty ratio, 16%. So OECD in 2015 on USA, OECD report says wealth inequality is worse than income inequality in the United States. Top 10% income earners occupy 30% of total income. Top 10% rich households hold 76% of total US net worth. Top 10% occupies US net worth wealth 76%. After the global financial crisis in 2007, average real household income increased by 2.5%. Lowest income, 10% income class average real income decreased by 3.2%. So top 10% real average income increased by 10.6%. Okay. IMF report on USA or IMF report on Korea. If top 20% income increase by 1%, GDP growth rate will decline by 0.08%. If lower 20% income increase by 1% point, GDP growth rate will increase 0.38%. In other words, IMF report arguing that poor growth, in other words, if you help income increase by lower income ratio, lower income bracket people, GDP will be more promoted. So in other words, more income inequality will reduce GDP growth rate. That's the IMF report on Korea. World labor productivity average increased by 2.6%, but 2014 decreased by 2.1%. So after 2014, labor productivity declined instead of increase. Total factor productivity, Europe and Japan started experiencing the decline in labor product from early 1990s. So total efficiency measure comes. Productivity slowdown is a common trend. And here is a famous curve that I want to share with you. This is income inequality in the United States. It is quoted from Piketty, his well-known book, 21st Century Capital. Capital in the 21st Century. In his famous book, he showed income inequality in the United States between 1910 to 2010. So on the left-hand side, share of the income is share of income, and this is a yearly variation. So for example, if this share of capital to income is increasing, that means income inequality is deteriorating, not improving. So earlier period, 1910, 1940, income inequality was very high. After World War II, income inequality got improved, lowered. But recently, there is a strong tendency that income inequality in the United States is worsening. You see skyrocketing income inequality. Why? Why is this so? Is this a worldwide phenomenon? Capital income ratio in Europe, and this was a capital income ratio in United States. Capital income ratio in Europe, look at Germany, France, United Kingdom, to some extent all the same. This area, 1870, 1910, is a landlord-dominated area. Therefore, capital income ratio should be very high, unequal distribution era. So this is, you may have seen the movie Le Miserable. Le Miserable is the movie which shows, very devastating income inequality near French Revolution. Someone was stealing bread and it was penalized. He was sent to jail. That kind of very tragic story of Le Miserable was dominating 1870 to 1910. That period, capital income ratio in Europe, 바뀌었어. 내가 메시지 보냈어, 쟤한테. 내가 지금 강의 중이니까, 오케이. Sorry. Sorry that I was interrupted by emergency call. Okay, so what they show you here, even in Europe, that era, Le Miserable era, that is on the French Revolution era, very high capital income ratio, meaning that income inequality was very large, because it's inevitable. There was only people who are landlords, who are rich. The rest of the farmers are all non-rich, poor. But that kind of improved during World War II, World War I. But recently, since 1960, again, this disparity going up, income inequality is going up. Not only Germany, France, United Kingdom. So this is a Piketty curve. Piketty curve, income inequality globally worsening in the United States, then in Europe too. Okay. This is the projection by world capital income ratio. You can see at the beginning, 1860, 1910, it was high, improved during World War II, World War I, through 1960s, but from 2010, it got getting worse and continued to exist, such that large income inequality will dominate on a global scale, global scene. So this is the capitalistic society's problem. As I said, on the one hand, socialist economic bloc has a problem because there was a lack of innovation, lack of incentives, therefore lack of growth, lack of investment. Everything was very slow, no incentives. On the other hand, in capitalistic society, incentives are plenty, but this income inequality going on a global scale. This is capitalist society's evil. Lack of efficiency, lack of innovation, lack of incentive are the evil of communistic society, socialist society. So both have evil. I'm showing you here national capital in rich countries due to land price bubble. It reached like that. This is very interesting. we call Milanovic. He was a World Bank economist. Now I think in private university professor. This is the research he has done while he was working for World Bank. This curve is known as elephant curve. You see, here it looks like elephant's nose. What does this curve telling us? It's an interesting story. So what he tried to do, percentile of global income distribution. So here, left-hand corner, was poorest group. Maybe someone in Africa or Bangladesh, world poorest group families are here. World richest group, top 5%. The guy, owner of Amazon, owner of Apple, Musk, all those super rich guys, 95% here. So we are lining up world poorest family to world richest family in one line. Okay. Now, what is vertical axis? Real income. Between 1988 to 2008, so about 20 years. Why do we start from 1988? Because 1988 is the year in which Berlin Wall was down, fallen down. So it's 1988 is a symbolically kind of a globalization period, beginning of globalization, 1988. So after globalization period began, after 20 years, by 2008, Milanovic attempted to measure how much income real increased. For example, the middle class, who is here on world scale? Maybe China's rich, Arabians rich, some Arabian family, some rich Latin American family should be here. Their real income increased most. Who suffered? Who are those guys? 75%, 85% categories. So old-fashioned, very rich family. They call this middle class in the United States. In like Pittsburgh or in Sun Belt area or somewhere. And they suffered. Their real income didn't increase at all. On the other hand, the richest 5%, skyrocketing income increase. So they call this reflected in Donald Trump phenomenon. So those people who suffered real income loss, no gain in their real income, they were balloting, they were against US politics. And they were betting on Trump. President Trump got elected by these people. Okay, so we call this as elephant curve. I try to see if elephant curve exists in case of Korea, but I could not see end point like this. Elephant's nose up, not that much sharply nose up, a little bit nose up, but that's it. So I felt that Korea's income distribution is still seemingly okay, not that elephant curve repeating. Worldwide phenomena, another phenomena is declining labor income share. And this is researched by many economists. There is a strong tendency that in major European countries, labor income share versus capital income share in total national income. Labor income share is declining recently. And they show US, Japan, Canada, Australia, everywhere labor income share is declining like this. Turkey, China, India, very much fluctuating. We can hardly believe their data set, but at any rate, declining ratio is observed. So, with this background, for example, this is Korea's capital income ratio in Korea. You see, it's not dramatically kind of Piketty curve, but there is a symptom that this line is going up. So even in Korea, income inequality is getting worse. Polarization is appearing. Okay. So this our capital and income ratio keep increasing, which is a dismal sign that Korea's income inequality is getting worse. Okay. So, is there any exit for the capitalist economy to avoid this poverty trap? In other words, income inequality trap, and move on to improving system. According to Piketty, and I also derived my own, the only exit can be found like this. Okay, so this is how can then capitalist society survive? According to Marx, as capital increases, okay, for example, as capital increases, as you can see, as United States, as capital increasing like this, as capital increases, the yield on capital will decline. So the yield, percentage yield on capital is declining. That's what Marx expressed doomsday. Capitalists earning no income, so that capital society goes into ruin. In Marx's definition, they call infinite accumulation of capital. So if we reach at this stage by US diagram, the yield on interest rate on capital will become zero. So capitalists own nothing, and capitalists all go to bankruptcy. So here is a Piketty's suggestion, and I agree with his suggestion. Okay. According to our capitalist neoclassical growth process, G is GDP growth rate. V is total factor productivity. As you learned, overall efficiency measure. N is population. Okay. So if you want to have healthy G, for example, 2 or 3% or 4% GDP growth rate, you must have either population growth or efficiency growth. Total factor productivity, you have learned in chapter 4, total factor productivity was what? Overall efficiency measure. You remember in growth accounting? So if you want to have 3% sensible, sustainable growth rate, GDP growth rate, you need to have either efficiency growth 3% plus at least 1% or 2% population growth. So if N is the population growth is 1%, V should be at least 2% to keep G 3%. Okay, so what is the messaging? The only exit of the capitalist growth process to avoid catastrophic ending of capitalist society is to achieve this of overall efficiency, because we are facing with declining population and cannot be greater than 2%, usually less than 1%. So if you have N less than 1%, unless you have V, overall efficiency growth, total factor productivity growth, 2 to 3%, you cannot have economic growth 2 to 3%. Okay, so this shows you the importance of capitalistic society being in survival, to survive, not to cause Marxist doomsday, not to invite Marxist catastrophic situation, to have minimum sustainable growth in capitalistic society. You need to achieve overall efficiency 2 to 3% per year. Total factor productivity. How can you do that? By continuous R&D, innovation, new technology, new market research. Everything should be renewed to get V 2 to 3%, so that with 1% population growth rate, G could be reasonably 2 to 3% sustainable growth. That's the only exit that the capitalist society can become protected, can survive on its own, and can head to avoid catastrophic consequence and become surviving. And that's the only capitalist society's exit. Okay? These are a little bit hardcore recent economic theory. The rest of the things you can just take a look at as a reference. But my highlight is to this Piketty identity equation. That's the survival strategy for any healthy capitalist growth process to become available. Okay, today's talk will be here. We discussed income inequality within Korea and income inequality trend on a global scale. Thank you for your attention. That's it. Any question for today's talk? Juliana Maslakova, Grerovia, Maria,